Hello everyone and welcome to a new video dedicated to our beloved Snoopy and the world of Peanuts. The December 9th, 1950 Peanuts strip is a perfect example of the subtle irony that would characterize Charles Schulz's entire work and his ability to play with the language and childlike logic of his characters from the very first weeks of the comic strip. In this short sequence, we see Charlie Brown addressing Snoopy with a series of epithets that, on the surface, should sound like insults or slurs, but are actually presented in a context that defies the reader's expectations. The scene seems to begin aggressively, with Charlie Brown seemingly ready to take all his frustration out on Snoopy, but, as is often the case in his strips, Schulz reverses the dynamics at the end of the vignette. The ending, unexpected and comical, reverses the situation and leaves the reader with a smile, as if, after a brief tension, serenity is restored through the nonsense and humor typical of a child's view of the world. This strip is a perfect example of how Schulz was able to work on multiple levels, both visually and conceptually. The composition, rhythm, and contrast between Charlie Brown's actions and Snoopy's reaction are elements that not only enrich the plot, but also anticipate the emotional depth that will characterize the characters over the years. Although Charlie Brown is still far from becoming the icon we will come to know, in this strip we can already grasp an unseen aspect of his personality, a frustration expressed in a comic way and an attempt at control that fails to impose itself on his world, suggesting his vulnerability. On the other hand, Snoopy, though still in his primitive forms, shows us a reaction that adds a touch of humor and reflection to the scene, anticipating his character that, though not yet fully developed, demonstrates its own form of independence and wisdom. The strip not only deepens the relationship between the two protagonists, but also reveals how Schulz was in a phase of experimentation with Snoopy's distinctive traits. The beagle we see in this strip is far from the iconic image we would come to know in later years. His reaction is less imaginative and more disenchanted, an aspect that underscores his evolution as a character. By analyzing the strip in detail, we can not only discover Schulz's artistic and narrative choices, but also contextualize the comic within the development of the Peanuts in its early months. Interestingly, at this time, Schulz was still refining his style and trying to establish the dynamics and tone that would make the comic so beloved around the world. This gives us pause to reflect on the historical context as well, a time when comics were beginning to take on a new dimension, in part due to Schulz's ability to mix humor and reflections on everyday life. In the first vignette, Charlie Brown stands still with his hands clenched into fists and a serious expression on his face. He looks straight ahead and utters the phrase, "You dog." His posture suggests determination, almost as if he is accusing someone of something serious. In this moment, Charlie Brown does not appear as the insecure and awkward little boy we often know, but rather as a figure who has somehow found his voice, albeit in a somewhat grotesque way. Here Schulz uses essential but effective drawing to convey a sense of tension. The character is standing on a stylized ground line, a hallmark of the early Peanuts strips, where backgrounds were almost non-existent. This minimalist approach allowed Schulz to focus attention on the characters and their expressions. The word uttered by Charlie Brown, seemingly innocuous, sounds almost like an insult when delivered in the right tone. It is a term that, while not inherently offensive, acquires a load of meaning that contributes to the creation of an ironic and comic effect. And this is already an early indication of the comic direction the strip will take. During this period, Schulz experimented a great deal with the use of language in the Peanuts, often exploiting words in ambiguous or unexpected ways to create ironic effects. The fact that Charlie Brown is uttering this word without any specific context intrigues the reader and leads him to wonder what is going on. In the second vignette, we see Charlie Brown even more resolute, his mouth wide open as he yells, "Cur!" The intensity of the scene increases, with the protagonist now appearing angrier than in the previous vignette. The term used, "cur," is a stronger insult than the simple dog of the first vignette, which reinforces the feeling that Charlie Brown is deliberately trying to offend someone. This is interesting because we usually see him as a more passive character, often the victim of events and teasing from other children. Here, however, he is the one who is active, even aggressive in his tone. Somehow, Charlie Brown seems to defy his own destiny, hurling an insult that seems almost like an attempt to master a situation that usually eludes him. It is a stylistic choice that shows us how his character was still being defined in these early strips. Schulz plays with the simplicity of the drawing to enhance the drama of the scene. Charlie Brown's round face becomes almost a gaping mouth, and the curved line of his eyebrows accentuates his expression of anger. This kind of expressive exaggeration would be a hallmark of Schulz's style, which over time would further refine his ability to convey emotion with just a few strokes. In the third vignette, Charlie Brown repeats the insult he hurled in the previous vignette, but this time with even greater intensity, almost as if he can no longer hold back his frustration. His face, already tense before, now appears even more contorted with anger. His eyebrows, now completely lowered, accentuate his expression of irritation, while his mouth, still wide open, amplifies the intensity of his speech. Charlie Brown's body is tilted slightly forward, as if his own body is responding to the emotional tension exploding from his voice. At this point, the reader expects a reaction from the recipient of the insults. After watching Charlie Brown launch into this verbal attack, the tension is palpable and the expectation of an immediate response increases. However, Schulz maintains the mystery of who the recipient of the insults is, building an additional layer of suspense. This mechanism of expectation is one of the most effective narrative tools Schulz uses in these early strips, and he will do so again later in the series. The reader, immersed in Charlie Brown's emotional escalation, now finds himself wondering, who is the bad dog Charlie Brown is yelling at? Is it another child? Is it Snoopy? The suspense remains suspended, keeping the attention high and urging the reader to continue reading to find out what will happen next. In the fourth vignette, the tension buildup in the first three scenes finally finds its comic outlet with the appearance of Snoopy. The puppy is sitting quietly, his head tilted slightly to the side, with a question mark above it, emphasizing his utter confusion at Charlie Brown's attitude. His expression is innocent and puzzled, not understanding at all why he is receiving those insults. It is a turning point in the strip, where the contrast between Charlie Brown's unwarranted aggressiveness and Snoopy's utter naivete generates an immediate and irresistible humorous effect. It is precisely this contrast that makes the joke so effective. The dog does not defend himself, does not react with anger or sadness, but just being himself, unaware of why Charlie Brown is behaving the way he is. This kind of humorous construction will be one of the finest stylistic features of the Peanuts strips, where irony often arises from the gap between the reader's expectation and the reality of the interactions between the characters. This scene is a perfect demonstration of how Schulz used the contrast between characters to generate humor. Charlie Brown, with his constant state of frustration and existential crises, is confronted by a dog who could not be further from his worldview. Snoopy does not worry, does not get angry, and does not get caught up in the drama. This contrast between Charlie Brown's anxiety and insecurity and Snoopy's almost stoic serenity will be one of the series' most recurring and beloved dynamics, and here we see one of its earliest incarnations. This strip also shows how skilled Schulz was at creating humor with just a few elements. There is no dynamic action, no exaggerated physical gags or elaborate situations. Yet, the scene is incredibly effective and manages to wring a smile out of you thanks to its clever construction and perfect visual execution. This minimalism is one of the hallmarks of Peanuts, and one of the reasons the comic strip is still so popular today. One of the most interesting things about this strip is the way Schulz plays with anticipation and surprise. Until the last cartoon, we do not know to whom Charlie Brown is addressing his insults. When the recipient is finally revealed, the twist is hilarious. It is only Snoopy, who looks at the protagonist with an innocent and confused expression, having no idea why he is going through all this. This strip is a brilliant example of everything that has made the Peanuts a masterpiece. Subtle humor based on intelligence and narrative construction, iconic characters who communicate more with expressions than words, and an artistic minimalism that, far from being a limitation, becomes one of its greatest strengths. It is also a testament to the evolution of Charlie Brown and Snoopy, two of the most beloved characters in comics history who are still finding their voices here. Although decades have passed since the publication of this strip, its effectiveness remains intact. It still manages to make those who read it smile today, demonstrating how Schulz's humor is truly timeless.
If you enjoyed yourselves, subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and activate the little bell to stay updated, and see you next, friends.